Should learning Spanish be hard work, or should it be fun? Learning a language obviously requires some consistent daily effort. If you've gotten into a sustainable pattern of working on Spanish every day, it feels amazing. You've found your stride. Maybe you have a lovely morning routine where you pour yourself a cup of tea, you pick up some study materials, and follow the same routine every day. You feel like a boss, regularly knocking out a little bit of Spanish work every morning. But there's a danger here for many Spanish students, in fact, something that most students end up falling into sooner or later: the trap of non-challenging practice. There are many ways that routine Spanish practice can become non-challenging. Let's look at just 2 ways that this can very easily happen. First, some students spend a lot of their routine study time simply reciting scripted Spanish conversations. This feels productive and really rewarding because, hey, you can hear yourself speaking Spanish on a daily basis. But that's not the same thing as genuine language acquisition. Simply parroting back some scripted phrases doesn't mean you can actually come up with your own Spanish sentences on the fly in real life. Second, here's something that often happens to much more advanced Spanish students, and that is to fall into the trap of using lots and lots of Spanish flashcards and then turning your flashcard routine into basically a robotic system. If you're using a Lightner box or an online SRS system such as Anki, you're probably really proud of how many Spanish words and phrases you've been able to learn. But the trap here is that this type of system makes it way too easy to favor volume over creativity. When you have to get through dozens of flashcards a day in order to maintain your system, there's usually no time to think of creative ways to practice each card. So you just do the easiest thing, which is to get through them all really quickly and systematically. Whatever your routine is, if it's too straightforward and not challenging, that's a problem. Because when your daily practice isn't creative and isn't challenging, that means it's ultimately not productive. The fact is, in order for your personal Spanish practice to be meaningful, there has to be some level of creativity on a daily basis. After all, what you ultimately want is to be able to speak with Spanish speakers face to face, navigating real-life conversation topics that are going to change and weave around throughout the conversation. Face-to-face conversation is an inherently creative endeavor. You're not following a script, you're not reciting vocabulary words one by one. In a good chat with a native Spanish speaker, you're making constant leaps and connections between all the different things you know about Spanish, adeptly tying them cohesively with the topic at hand. And this is what the best Spanish practice does. Your study routine should have you being creative on a daily basis, not just mechanically reviewing vocabulary words or scripts, but genuinely inventing on a daily basis, the same way that you would do it in a real conversation. The good news is that this doesn't mean you have to throw out your existing routines altogether. With a couple of little tweaks, we can take what's already working for you, the daily Spanish study routine that you know and love, and add just a little bit of a twist to it to make it more creative and challenging. And although this is going to be a bit of hard work at first, it will get easier and more fun over time. Plus, you'll see the transformation almost instantly because your Spanish conversations will improve in extraordinary ways, which will help motivate you to keep the new patterns going. First of all, let's start with the end in mind by shining a spotlight on what's missing from non-creative practice. That way we know exactly what we need to add into your practice time. To begin with, try to think back to the last time you had a really productive conversation in Spanish. Not just one where you felt encouraged by how well you communicated, but a conversation where you felt like you had a breakthrough in your ability to speak well on the fly. This kind of thing happens when you not only use your Spanish vocabulary well, but you also find yourself selecting the right vocabulary to use in real time, making creative choices that just click in place beautifully. There's a subtle difference here between just using some of your own vocabulary well and actually selecting the right vocabulary to use in the first place. Let's use a pretty simple example. Maybe in your last practice session with your Spanish coach, you were getting some real-life practice using both tú and usted interchangeably. It's one thing just to use usted over and over with different verbs and tenses so that you know how to use it right. It's next level to be able to switch back and forth between usted and tú based on the context, and then choose the correct corresponding verb conjugations on the fly. To borrow an analogy from the author Barbara Oakley, this is a lot like knowing how to use both a hammer and a screwdriver, but not just using one of them over and over. You're actually adeptly switching between the hammer and the screwdriver because you can tell which one you need at any given time. Normally, when we practice on our own, we do the equivalent of just using one tool over and over. Maybe we practice with the hammer a whole bunch one day, and then we practice with the screwdriver a whole bunch the next day. This is what our practice is like when we're just memorizing scripts or reciting back vocabulary mechanically. This type of practice doesn't require us to make the types of creative choices that we have to make in real-life conversation. But in the example where your Spanish coach forced you to figure out whether to use tú versus usted in your coaching session, you had to make game-time creative decisions, kind of like having to reach quickly for the hammer or the screwdriver at the last second in real time. So how do we apply this to daily solo practice? Let's imagine that you've decided to start getting better at switching between tú and usted on your own. You want to be able to choose one or the other at the drop of a hat and flawlessly conjugate the verbs that you use with them correctly. Maybe all that this takes, for now, is to keep using the scripts that you're practicing with, but whenever you encounter tú or usted, see how quickly you can flip it to the opposite one in a grammatically correct way. For example, maybe the conversation script that you're practicing uses the question, ¿Usted quiere que yo lo haga? So what you could do is practice changing it to ¿Tú quieres que yo lo haga? Just this one little habit of slightly changing a sentence in a meaningful way can make you much quicker on your feet in real-life conversations. Or maybe you're practicing with flashcards, but instead of simply rehearsing one word or phrase at a time from the cards, you also incorporate tú or usted into your practice. So you decide that for 8 cards in a row, you're going to practice inventing sentences that involve the flashcard word plus the word tú or usted. For example, let's say that these are your next 8 flashcards. Right, so these are just a bunch of phrases in Spanish that you've been practicing recently, and these are the next 8 cards that are coming up in your review. Now you have a fun exercise that you can do with these cards. Try to create sentences out of them, each one including either tú or usted, switching back and forth between the two. So here's what it might look like. You turn the first one into ¿Tú ves las gallinas ponedoras? The second one turns into Usted vive en un mundo complejo. The third one, Yo estudiaba esas jerarquías sociales contigo. Then, Él estudiaba las comunidades fuertes del mundo antiguo con usted. And so on. You can find ways to work this type of creativity into your routine no matter what topics you're studying. Maybe you've moved past any difficulty with tú and usted, but now you're trying to work on the subtle differences between empezar and comenzar. So for several flashcards, try to create sentences on the fly that use empezar or comenzar, alternating back and forth, with each of the flashcards that comes up. Here's yet another way to work some fun, challenging creativity into your daily study. Let's say that instead of having a set topic that you're trying to practice, like tú versus usted, or comenzar versus empezar, you just let the flashcards themselves give you some creative exercises. What you do is you simply draw 2 cards at a time instead of 1 card at a time, and you draw these 2 cards at random and try to make a sentence out of the 2 of them together. The possibilities here are endless. You'll find yourself having to come up with new sentences that you've never thought of before every single day. This will keep your creative juices flowing and force you to get better and better at creating Spanish sentences on the fly all the time. Ultimately, no matter what your current Spanish habits are, what's important is to have a routine that keeps you creatively interweaving different things that you learn. The best learning happens right at the edge of our comfort zone. So if you use these creative exercises to keep challenging you every day, your real-life Spanish will get stronger very quickly. Best of all, once you find your stride, even this hard work of language learning will become enjoyable. Once creative challenges become habits, you can feel just as satisfied and fulfilled in these challenging routines as you used to feel in your kind of less rigorous routine that we described at the beginning of this video. In fact, your new routine might be even more fun and more fulfilling because of how it engages your whole mind. Plus, it's super motivating to see the quick results it'll give you in real-life Spanish. So, should learning Spanish be hard work, or should it be fun? The best Spanish practice is both. Use creative challenges to get the best possible practice, and you'll be on the fastest track possible to fluency.